Daniel's words echoed through the hotel bar. You got fat. Nayla felt every eye judge her body, never knowing she was carrying a child whose father could end careers with one phone call. But here's what made her blood run cold. The Korean Mafia boss wasn't supposed to know she was in Seoul, wasn't supposed to know about the pregnancy. Yet 30 minutes after her ex's cruel words, 3 men in black suits appeared at her table with one message. Mr. Kim requests your presence. Now. Hey there. I got this Mafia Boss idea from your comments asking for more protective hero stories. Would you have told your ex about the pregnancy right there, or kept it secret like she did? Drop your answer below and hit subscribe so you catch what happens when they finally talk. Now, back to the drama. Nayla's hand trembled as she set down the pregnancy test. 3 weeks after that night she'd tried so hard to forget. The hotel bathroom felt too bright, too cold. She'd come to Seoul for a conference on ancient Egyptian artifacts. Nothing more. Her ex-boyfriend's voice still echoed from earlier that evening when she'd run into him at the hotel bar. You got fat. Daniel had said it loud enough for others to hear, his new girlfriend laughing behind her hand. Nayla had felt every eye in that bar turn toward her, measuring her suddenly fuller figure, her face that carried more weight than it had 6 months ago. She hadn't bothered to explain, hadn't told him about the baby growing inside her, hadn't mentioned the father. Because how could she explain Seo-hoon Kim? 3 months earlier, she'd been standing in front of a stolen artifact at an underground auction in Cairo, trying to photograph evidence for the museum she worked for. She'd felt someone watching her then, too. That piece belongs in a museum, a voice had said behind her, smooth and controlled. Not in some criminal's private collection. She'd turned to find him. Tall, broader than most Korean men she'd seen, with a presence that made the armed guards nearby look like children playing dress-up. His suit probably cost more than her yearly salary, but it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Dark, patient, seeing everything. I'm trying to document it, she'd whispered, glancing nervously at the security. Before it disappears forever. He'd stepped closer, just slightly. You're going to get yourself killed. Then stop watching and help me. Something had shifted in his expression. Maybe surprise, maybe respect. He'd pulled out his phone, made one call, and within 10 minutes, the entire auction had been raided by authorities she suspected he'd paid off long ago. He'd walked her out through the chaos, his hand barely touching her lower back, but burning through her dress anyway. Seo-hoon Kim, he'd said in the car he'd insisted on providing. And you're going to have dinner with me. It hadn't been a question. She should have said no, should have thanked him and disappeared back to her safe, predictable life. But instead she'd heard herself say, Nayla Mansour, and I suppose I owe you that much. His smile had been slight, dangerous. You owe me nothing. I want your company because you interest me. That first dinner had stretched into sunrise, then another dinner, then a week where he'd shown up everywhere she went in Cairo, always with some excuse, always watching her with those patient, hungry eyes. Why me? She'd asked one night, standing on her hotel balcony while he stood too close behind her. Because you walked into a room full of armed criminals to save a piece of history, he'd said quietly. Because you didn't flinch when you saw me. Because... He'd stopped, his jaw tightening. Because, she'd pressed. Because I looked at you and recognized something I didn't know I'd been searching for. She'd turned to face him then, her back against the railing, his body blocking out the rest of the world. You don't even know me. I know you're brilliant, stubborn, brave in ways that terrify me. His hand had come up slowly, giving her time to move away. She hadn't. His fingers had traced her jawline so gently it hurt. I know you make me want to burn down everything I've built just to see you smile. That's insane. Yes. The honesty in that one word had cracked something open inside her. She'd reached up, her hand covering his where it rested against her cheek. "What are you, Seo-hoon, really?" "Dangerous," he'd said. "Someone you should run from." "And if I don't want to run?" His other hand had gripped the railing beside her hip, caging her in. His forehead had lowered to touch hers, his breath warm against her lips. "Then I'll spend every day proving I'm worth the risk." That night had changed everything. Not because of what happened, but because of how gentle he'd been, how patient, how he'd treated her body like something sacred, even while his own control had nearly shattered. Afterward, he'd held her for hours, his fingers, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder, neither of them speaking because words would have broken the spell. "I have to return to Seoul," he'd finally said as dawn broke. "Business I can't avoid." Fear had clutched her chest. So, this was me being selfish. He'd turned her to face him, his eyes fierce. "I should have left you alone. Should have walked away after that auction. But I couldn't. And now what? Now you're under my skin, Nayla. Now I'm going to want things I have no right to want." She'd kissed him then, silencing his doubts with her lips against his. What if I want those things too? But he'd left the next morning, and she'd returned to her life, trying to convince herself it had been just a beautiful moment out of time, until the pregnancy test had shown 2 lines, until Daniel's cruel words had reminded her that the world saw her differently now. Standing in that hotel bathroom in Seoul, Nayla made a decision. She'd come to this conference, and she'd handle this on her own. She wouldn't tell Seo-hoon, wouldn't trap him with a baby he'd never asked for. She'd protect this child the way he'd protected her that night in Cairo. Fiercely, without hesitation, even if it meant doing it alone. But as she stepped out of the bathroom, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Korean area code. "I know you're in Seoul. Don't think I haven't been keeping track of you. We need to talk. JK." Her heart stopped, then raced. She typed back with shaking fingers. "How did you get this number?" His response came immediately. "I've had it since Cairo. Been waiting for you to reach out first. Clearly, I was being too patient." "Where are you?" She shouldn't respond. Shouldn't pull him into this mess. But her fingers moved anyway. Grand Hyatt, room 842. "But Seo-hoon, don't move. I'm coming to you." Nayla stared at her phone, panic and hope warring in her chest. He was coming. After 3 months of silence from her side, he'd been watching, waiting, and now he was coming. She pressed her hand to her still flat stomach. "Your father is either going to be the best thing or the most complicated thing that ever happens to us. Probably both." 20 minutes later, a knock on her door made her jump. She checked the peephole, and there he was. Exactly as she remembered, but somehow more. His suit was different, darker. His hair was shorter. But those eyes were the same patient storm she'd dreamed about for months. She opened the door slowly. He didn't move to enter. Just stood there, drinking her in like a man dying of thirst. "You look fat?" she offered bitterly, Daniel's words still fresh. "That's what my ex said earlier tonight." Something deadly flickered across Seo-hoon's face. "Your ex is here. Was. At the hotel bar. Doesn't matter." "It matters." His voice had dropped to something cold and final. "His name?" "Seo-hoon, please." "His name, Nayla." She sighed, recognizing the futility of refusing. "Daniel Pierce, but seriously, he's not worth. He made you cry." She hadn't realized tears were sliding down her cheeks until he said it. "He made me remember why I don't trust easily." Seo-hoon stepped forward then, entering her space like he'd never left it, his hands coming up to frame her face with devastating gentleness. "And I made you trust me, then disappeared for 3 months while you carried—" His eyes dropped to her stomach, then back to her face. "You're pregnant." It wasn't a question. Her breath caught. "How did you—" Because I know every detail of your life, Nayla. Your medical appointments, your changed eating habits, the prenatal vitamins that started showing up on your credit card statements. His thumb brushed away her tears. Did you really think I'd let you face this alone? Anger flared through her shock. You've been spying on me? Protecting you. There's a difference. You had no right. I had every right the moment you let me touch you. His voice remained calm but absolute. The moment I realized I'd left part of myself inside you. Did you think I could just walk away? She tried to step back, but he followed, his hand sliding to her waist, holding her steady. You left, Seo-hoon. You walked out that door in Cairo and I didn't hear from you for months. What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to know that I was giving you space to decide if you wanted this life. His forehead lowered to hers. Because once I claim you fully, Nayla, there's no going back. My world is dark, dangerous. I needed you to have time to choose, before I made it impossible for you to leave. And now? His hands tightened on her waist, possessive and gentle. Now you're carrying my child. Now choice is a luxury neither of us has. Now I'm going to make sure you and this baby are protected, even if you hate me for it. She should have been angry, should have pushed him away. But instead, she felt something inside her uncoil, some tension she'd been carrying for months. Don't hate you? Then what do you feel? His eyes searched hers, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen from him. Scared, confused, and she swallowed hard. Relieved that you're here. His kiss landed on her forehead, soft and lingering. I'm not going anywhere. Not this time. Not ever. You can't promise that. Watch me. Later that night, after he'd ordered room service and made sure she ate, after he'd run her a bath and sat on the floor beside the tub just talking to her about everything and nothing, after he'd tucked her into bed like something precious. He'd sat in the chair by the window, watching her drift toward sleep. Seo-hoon? She'd murmured. Yes? What happened to Daniel? A pause. Then, he's been escorted out of Seoul with the suggestion that he never mention your name again. She should have been horrified. Instead, she felt oddly comforted. That's terrifying. Yes. And possessive. Yes. And probably illegal. Definitely illegal. His voice carried a hint of dark amusement. Sleep, Nayla. We'll argue about my methods in the morning. But she didn't want to argue. She wanted to sink into this feeling of being protected, claimed, wanted despite everything. Stay, she whispered. She heard him move, felt the bed dip as he stretched out beside her, fully clothed, but radiating heat. His arm came around her waist, his hand splaying protectively over her stomach. Always, he murmured against her hair, I'm always staying. The next morning brought complications. Nayla's conference panel was scheduled for 10, and she'd insisted on attending, despite Seo-hoon's visible disapproval. You need rest, he'd argued over breakfast in her room. I need to work. This conference is important. More important than our child's health? She'd glared at him over her coffee. Don't manipulate me with guilt. I'm pregnant, not fragile. And this baby is fine. His jaw had tightened, but he'd nodded. Then I'm coming with you. That's not necessary, Nayla. He'd leaned forward, his eyes holding hers with uncomfortable intensity. I've been away from you for 3 months. I'm not letting you out of my sight for the next 3 years. Argue if you want, but I'm coming. She'd wanted to argue, wanted to prove her independence, but the truth was, she wanted him there, wanted his solid presence beside her, wanted to show him off to the colleagues who'd watched Daniel humiliate her. Maybe that made her petty. She didn't care. Fine. But you sit in the back and don't glare at anyone. His smile had been brief. I'll try. The conference hall buzzed with academics and historians, most of whom Nayla had known for years. She felt their eyes on her as she entered, felt them notice Seo-hoon behind her like a dark shadow in an expensive suit. Her friend Zara rushed over immediately. "Girl, who is that?" Nayla felt heat creep up her neck. "Seo-hoon. We're together," Seo-hoon supplied smoothly, his hand finding the small of her back. "And you are?" "Zara Osman, Nayla's colleague from the Cairo Museum." Zara's eyes sparkled with curiosity. She never mentioned having a boyfriend, didn't she? Seo-hoon's tone suggested this bothered him more than he'd admit. Nayla jumped in quickly. "It's complicated. We've been figuring things out." "Well, whatever you're figuring out, it looks good on you." Zara squeezed her arm. "You're glowing. Seriously." "Because I'm pregnant with his baby," Nayla thought, but didn't say. "Thanks. I should probably get ready for my panel." "Right. But we're having coffee after, and you're telling me everything." Seo-hoon waited until Zara left before murmuring, "She seems nice. Should I have her investigated?" Nayla elbowed him. "You're terrible." "I'm thorough. There's a difference." Her panel went smoothly until the question and answer session. Then she saw him. Daniel, sitting 3 rows back with his new girlfriend plastered to his side. He raised his hand. "Dr. Mansour, I have a question about your research methodology." Her stomach dropped, but she kept her voice steady. "Yes? How do you maintain objectivity in your work when you're clearly so emotionally invested in Egyptian culture? Doesn't your personal bias compromise your academic integrity?" It was a loaded question, designed to undermine her credibility. Several people shifted uncomfortably. Nayla took a breath, ready to respond professionally. But Seo-hoon stood up from the back row. "Forgive my interruption," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the hall. "But I believe passion for one subject makes for better research, not worse. Dr. Mansour's emotional connection to her heritage gives her insights that detached observers miss. That's not bias. That's expertise." Stunned silence. Then murmurs of agreement. The panel moderator nodded. "Well said. Dr. Mansour, would you like to add anything?" She found Seo-hoon's eyes across the room, saw the protective fire there, the absolute refusal to let anyone diminish her. "Only that I agree with the gentleman in the back. Passion and objectivity aren't opposites. They're partners." Daniel's face reddened, but he shut up. His girlfriend looked embarrassed. After the panel ended, people swarmed Nayla with questions and compliments. Seo-hoon materialized at her side within seconds, his presence clearing space around her like a force field. "You didn't have to do that," she murmured. "Yes, I did. He was trying to humiliate you." "I can fight my own battles." "I know, but why should you have to when I'm here?" His hand touched her lower back, steadying her. "Besides, I enjoyed it." She couldn't help but smile. "Enjoyed defending me?" "Enjoyed making him realize you're under my protection now, that he'll never touch you or hurt you again. You're terrifying, you know that. Only to people who threaten what's mine." Later, over lunch at a quiet restaurant Seo-hoon had somehow reserved entirely for them, Nayla asked the question that had been building all morning. "What exactly do you do, Seo-hoon? And don't give me vague answers this time." He set down his chopsticks slowly. "I run an organization that operates in the spaces between legal and illegal. We acquire things for people who can't acquire them through normal channels. Art, information, justice. You're a criminal. I prefer entrepreneur. But yes, technically. Why? Because the world isn't fair, Nayla. Good people suffer while bad people thrive. I realized early on that I had the resources and ruthlessness to shift that balance." He paused. "I've done terrible things to protect the people I care about. I'll do worse if anyone threatens you or our child." She should have been horrified, should have gotten up and left. But instead she asked, "And if I ask you to stop?" "I can't stop being what I am. But I can promise I'll never bring that darkness to your doorstep. His eyes held hers with painful honesty. I can keep you separate from my world, protected from it. That sounds lonely. For both of us. Something raw flickered across his face. You'd rather be involved? I'd rather be honest. I'd rather know who you really are instead of some sanitized version you think I can handle. She reached across the table, her hand covering his. You've seen me at my most vulnerable. Let me see you the same way. He turned his hand over, lacing their fingers together. You might not like what you see. Try me. Over the next 2 weeks, he did exactly that. He showed her his world piece by piece. The warehouse where his legitimate shipping business operated. The office building that fronted his less legitimate enterprises. The men who worked for him, dangerous and loyal in equal measure. He introduced her to his second-in-command, a cold-eyed man named Sang Min, who looked her over once and said, "You're braver than I expected." "Why?" she'd asked. "Because most women run when they see what he really is. You're still here." "I'm still here," she'd agreed, meeting Seo Hoon's eyes across the room. Where else would I be? That night, Seo Hoon had taken her to his penthouse overlooking Seoul. The space was masculine, sparse, expensive. It looked nothing like a home and everything like a fortress. "This is where you live?" she'd asked, walking through rooms that echoed with emptiness. "This is where I sleep sometimes. I don't really live anywhere." That's sad. He'd been standing by the window, watching the city lights. "It's practical. Living requires letting your guard down. I don't have that luxury." She'd walked up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek between his shoulder blades. "You could. With me." His hands had covered hers, holding them tight against his chest. "You say that now. But when the reality hits, when you see how my enemies might use you, when the danger becomes real instead of theoretical, I'll still be here. You can't know that. Watch me." He'd turned in her arms then, his face showing more vulnerability than she'd ever seen from him. "I'm going to fail you, Nayla. I'm going to make mistakes. Going to be too controlling, too protective, too jealous. I'm going to scare you with how much I need you. Then scare me." She'd reached up, her fingers tracing his jaw. "I'm not fragile. I'm not going to break. Our baby is going to have the most devoted father in the world, even if that father is a little terrifying sometimes." His laugh had been rough, almost broken. "A little? Okay, a lot. But I kind of like it. You're insane." "Probably." She'd pulled him down until his forehead rested against hers. "But I'm your kind of insane, apparently." He'd kissed her then, not on the lips, but on her forehead, her cheeks, her closed eyelids, like he was worshipping something holy. "Move in with me," he'd whispered against her temple. "I live in Cairo." "Then I'll move there, or we'll split time. I don't care where we are as long as you're with me." "You're serious?" "Nayla, I've been serious since the moment I saw you in that auction house. Everything since then has just been me trying to catch up to what I knew the first time you looked at me." "What did you know?" His hands had framed her face, his eyes holding hers with devastating intensity. "That you were going to ruin me for anyone else. That I'd spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. That our child would be the luckiest kid alive because they'd have you as a mother." Tears had blurred her vision. "You can't just say things like that." "Why not? They're true." She'd buried her face in his chest, overwhelmed by the weight of his devotion. "I'm scared I'm going to wake up and this will all be a dream. Then I'll spend every day proving it's real." But reality came crashing in 2 days later, when Nayla's conference ended and she was scheduled to return to Cairo. Seo Hoon had been arranging to come with her, had already reorganized his entire life to accommodate hers. Then Sang-min had shown up at the penthouse with news that made Seo-hoon's face go blank and cold. "What is it?" Nayla had asked, recognizing danger in the sudden tension. "Business. Nothing you need to worry about." "Don't do that. Don't shut me out because you think I can't handle it." Seo-hoon had exchanged a look with Sang-min, then nodded. His second-in-command had spoken carefully. "One of our shipments was intercepted. The people responsible left a message. They know about Dr. Mansour. They're threatening her to draw you out." Cold fear had washed through Nayla's body. "Who are they?" "Rivals. People who want to weaken me by targeting what I care about." Seo-hoon's voice had been completely empty of emotion, which somehow made it more frightening. "Which means you can't go back to Cairo. Not yet. Maybe not for a while. I have a job, a life. I can't just disappear." "Your life doesn't matter if you're dead," he'd said flatly. The words had hit her like a slap. "Excuse me." He'd closed his eyes briefly, regret flashing across his face. "That came out wrong. I know what you meant. You meant that my career, my independence, everything I've worked for, none of it matters as much as your war with whoever these people are." "Nayla, no." She'd stepped back, anger and fear warring in her chest. "I knew your world was dangerous. I accepted that. But I won't become a prisoner because of it." "I'm not trying to imprison you. I'm trying to keep you alive. By making all my decisions for me? By telling me my life doesn't matter?" Sang-min had quietly excused himself. Seo-hoon had waited until the door closed before speaking again, his voice rough with barely controlled emotion. "Your life is the only thing that matters. You and our child. Everything else. My empire, my reputation, my own safety. All of it means nothing if I lose you. So yes, I'm being controlling. Yes, I'm making decisions you don't like. Because the alternative is you dead in some alley as a message to me. And I can't. I won't." His voice had cracked. Actually cracked. And suddenly she'd seen past the cold mafia boss to the terrified man underneath. She'd softened slightly. "I understand you're scared. But I need you to trust me to make my own choices, even when they scare you. What if your choice gets you killed? What if your protection suffocates me?" She'd moved closer, her hand finding his. "We need to find a middle ground, Seo-hoon, where I'm safe but still myself." He'd pulled her into his arms, holding her tight enough to hurt. "I don't know how to find that balance. I only know how to protect what's mine by any means necessary. Then learn. For me. For our baby." His hand had moved to her stomach, still flat but carrying their future. "And if I can't? Then we'll figure it out together. But you can't lock me away, and I can't pretend your world doesn't exist. We meet in the middle, or we don't meet at all." The ultimatum had hung between them, heavy and unavoidable. Finally, he'd nodded. "Okay. Middle ground. Which means you stay in Seoul for now. But you're not a prisoner. You work remotely. You have guards, but they're discreet. And," he'd swallowed hard, "and if you want to leave, I don't stop you, even if it kills me to let you go. I don't want to leave. You might, when the danger becomes real. Or I might surprise you by being stronger than you think." His kiss had landed on her forehead, lingering. "You surprise me every day." But the danger became very real, very quickly. 3 days later, while Nayla was having lunch with Zara at a cafe Seo-hoon had deemed safe, a black van had pulled up outside. She'd felt her guard tense beside her, had seen him speak urgently into his phone. Then Seo-hoon's voice in her ear through the earpiece he'd insisted she wear. "Stay calm, don't move. My men are 30 seconds out." "What's happening?" she'd whispered, trying not to panic. "Someone's watching you. Just stay exactly where you are." But Zara had stood up, oblivious. "I should get back to my hotel." The van door had opened. A man with a gun had started to emerge. Nayla's guard had moved instantly, pushing both women back inside the cafe. The window behind them had shattered. Screams, chaos. Then Seo-hoon's men had appeared from 3 directions, surrounding the van, guns drawn. The whole thing had lasted maybe 2 minutes, but Nayla's heart had been hammering so hard she'd thought it might burst. Zara had been hyperventilating. What the hell was that? I'm sorry, Nayla had managed. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. I shouldn't have. Is that really your boyfriend? Zara had been staring at Seo-hoon, who'd arrived in an armored car and was now barking orders to his men, his face carved from ice and fury. What does he do? It's complicated. Nayla, there are men with guns, multiple men, with guns. How is that? Complicated? Seo-hoon had entered the cafe then, going straight to Nayla, his hands checking her for injuries with barely controlled panic. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? I'm fine. We're fine. But Zara, he'd looked at her friend briefly. You'll be taken back to your hotel with a security detail. They'll watch you until you leave Korea, just in case. You'll be safe. I don't understand what's happening, Zara had said weakly. You don't need to. You just need to trust that I'll keep you safe because you matter to Nayla. He'd turned back to Nayla, his eyes fierce. And you're coming with me. Now, no arguments. She hadn't argued, couldn't, when her hands were still shaking, and her baby was suddenly more real, more vulnerable than ever. In the car, Seo-hoon had held her hand like a lifeline, his thumb rubbing circles on her palm. I should have anticipated this. Should have had more men, should have. You can't blame yourself. I can, and I do. They got within 50 feet of you, Nayla. 50 feet. If my guard had been a second slower. But he wasn't. I'm okay. We're okay. His jaw had been so tight it looked like it might shatter. This is what I was afraid of. This is why I wanted you to leave Seoul, to hide, to be anywhere but near me. And yet here I am, still choosing you. You're insane. You've mentioned that. She'd squeezed his hand. Where are we going? Somewhere safer. Somewhere they'll never find you. That somewhere turned out to be a fortress, disguised as a countryside estate, 2 hours outside Seoul. High walls, armed guards, technology that probably cost more than a small country's GDP. This is excessive, Nayla had said, staring at the security measures. This is necessary. Seo-hoon had helped her out of the car, his hand protective on her lower back. You'll stay here until I've eliminated the threat. How long will that take? However long it takes. He'd guided her inside, past guards who nodded, respectfully, through halls decorated with art that probably belonged in museums. There's a medical team on site for your prenatal care. Staff to cook whatever you need. Anything you want, it's yours. Except freedom. He'd stopped, turning to face her. If you want to leave, I won't stop you. But I'm begging you, Nayla. Stay. Stay where I know you're safe, where our child is safe. Please. The please had done it, the raw desperation in that single word. Okay, but you visit. Every day. You don't disappear into your war and leave me here alone. Every day, he'd promised, even if I have to fight through hell to get to you. And he'd kept that promise. Every single day for the next 3 weeks, no matter what else was happening, Seo-hoon had shown up. Sometimes bloodied, sometimes exhausted, sometimes so wound tight with tension she'd worried he might snap. But always there, always finding time to ask about her day, to check on the baby, to hold her like she was the only thing, keeping him sane. This can't go on forever, she'd said one night, curled against his side in the massive bed he'd insisted she use. You're going to exhaust yourself. I don't care. I do. Seo-hoon, you're running yourself into the ground trying to protect me and eliminate these people. Something has to give. It won't be you. It won't be our child. His hand had been on her stomach, where a small bump was finally visible. I'll burn myself out before I let anything happen to either of you. What if I asked you to stop, to let me go back to Cairo, to live my life, to take my chances? His whole body had tensed. Is that what you want? No. But I hate watching you destroy yourself. Then don't watch. Just be safe. Let me do what I need to do to make sure you can live without fear. She'd turned in his arms, facing him in the dim light. And what about you? Don't you deserve to live without fear too? I gave up that right the day I chose this life, his fingers had traced, her face like he was memorizing it. But you're good, Nayla. Pure in ways I stopped being years ago. Our child deserves to grow up with that goodness. I'm just trying to make sure they get that chance. They also deserve a father who's alive and present, not a ghost who's too busy with revenge to see them grow up. The words had hit him like a physical blow. She'd watched him process them, seen something shift in his eyes. You're right, he'd finally said. I've been so focused on elimination that I forgot. Building a life with you is more important than destroying my enemies. So what are we going to do? Compromise. Again. I keep you safe, but I also trust my people to handle things while I focus on being here. On being us. Us. I like that. His smile had been brief, but real. Me too. But 2 days later, everything changed. Sang-min arrived at the estate with news that made Seo-hoon's face go completely blank, which Nayla had learned meant he was furious beyond words. They took Ji-woo, Sang-min said quietly. Your cousin. They're holding him as leverage. Nayla's stomach dropped. Ji-woo was 19, a college student who had nothing to do with Seo-hoon's business, just a kid trying to live a normal life. When? Seo-hoon's voice was deadly calm. 2 hours ago. They sent this. Sang-min held out a phone showing a video. Ji-woo, tied to a chair, looking terrified, but unharmed. A distorted voice gave instructions. Trade the girl for the boy. Simple exchange. Tomorrow at midnight. Seo-hoon watched the video twice, his expression never changing. Then he looked at Nayla, and she saw the impossible choice written in his eyes. No, she said immediately. Don't even think it. He's innocent. He's 19. This is my fault for not protecting him better. And I'm carrying your child. You think I'm going to let our baby grow up without a father because you traded me to save your cousin? They won't kill me. They want me weak, not dead. But they will kill him to prove a point. Nayla felt ice in her veins. So we find another way. There is no other way. Not one that guarantees his safety. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. Listen to me. I know you want to save him. I know you feel responsible. But if you hand me over to these people, you'll never see me again. Never meet your child. Never have the life we've been building. Is that really what you want? His hands came up to cup her face, his eyes anguished. Of course not. But how do I live with myself if Ji-woo dies because I chose you? How do you live with yourself if your child grows up knowing you traded their mother to save someone else? The question hung between them, brutal and unavoidable. Sang-min looked away, clearly uncomfortable witnessing his boss's breakdown. Finally, Seo-hoon spoke to his second-in-command, without taking his eyes off Nayla. Get every man we have. Call in every favor. I want to know where they're holding him within 6 hours. And if we can't find him in time, then we make them think they're getting what they want, while we get what we need. Seo-hoon's voice hardened into something terrifying. Nobody takes my family and lives to discuss it. Over the next 18 hours, Nayla watched Seo-hoon transform into the man she'd only glimpsed before. Cold, strategic, absolutely ruthless. He coordinated teams, planned assaults, made calls that she suspected ended lives on the other end, But every hour, he'd come find her, touch her stomach, kiss her forehead, remind himself what he was fighting for. "You should rest," she'd said around 3 in the morning, finding him still in his office surrounded by maps and surveillance photos. "Can't. Not until this is done." She'd walked behind his chair, her hands kneading the impossible tension in his shoulders. "You're no good to anyone if you collapse. I'm no good to anyone if Ji-woo dies." "Seo-hoon," she'd leaned down, her cheek against his. "You're doing everything you can. That's all anyone can do." His hand had come up to cover hers, where it rested on his shoulder. "What if it's not enough? Then we'll face that together. But I believe in you. Your men believe in you. And Ji-woo, he knows you're coming for him. How can you be so calm? Because one of us needs to be. And because I know, whatever happens tonight, you'll have done everything possible to save him without sacrificing us." He'd turned in his chair then, pulling her into his lap despite her pregnancy, his face buried in her neck. "I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway." His laugh had been rough and broken. "Best thing that ever happened to me." At 11 that night, Seo-hoon's team had found Ji-woo's location through methods Nayla suspected she was better off not knowing. An abandoned factory on the outskirts of Seoul, heavily guarded, but not impossibly so. "I'm going in," Seo-hoon had announced, checking his weapons with practiced efficiency. "Like hell you are," Sang-min had argued. "That's what they expect. You walk in there and you're dead. Then I'm dead. But Ji-woo lives." Nayla had stepped forward, her voice cutting through the argument. "What if they think I'm coming? What if we use me as bait?" Both men had turned to stare at her like she'd lost her mind. "Absolutely not," Seo-hoon said flatly. "Hear me out. They want me, right? So we make them think they're getting me. We set up the exchange. But it's not me. It's someone who looks like me from a distance. By the time they realize, your team is already inside getting Ji-woo out." Sang-min had looked thoughtful. "That could actually work." "No." Seo-hoon's voice was final. "I'm not using you, even as a decoy. The risk is too high." "The risk is higher if you walk in there like some self-sacrificing hero," Nayla had shot back. "At least my plan gives everyone a chance to survive. Except if something goes wrong, if they see through it. If. Seo-hoon, you can't protect everyone from everything. Sometimes you have to take calculated risks." He'd stared at her, war raging in his eyes. Finally, he'd turned to Sang-min. "Find someone who can pass for her at a distance, full body armor underneath, and I want 20 men in position before we even start this." 30, Nayla had corrected. 30, Seo-hoon had agreed with the ghost of a smile. "You're going to give me a heart attack, you know that? Better a heart attack than a funeral." The plan had been set in motion with terrifying speed. A female operative named Hai-wan, who was roughly Nayla's height and build, had been dressed in her clothes, given a wig, and briefed on the bare minimum of what to do. Nayla had watched from a surveillance van 2 blocks away, her heart in her throat as she saw Hai-wan approach the factory at exactly midnight. Saw the doors open. Saw armed men emerge. Seo-hoon stood beside her, his hand crushing hers, his entire body vibrating with tension. "This is going to work," she'd whispered. "It has to." The exchange had started, Hai-wan walking forward slowly. Ji-woo being brought out, stumbling but alive. They were 10 feet apart when someone shouted. The wig had shifted slightly in the wind, revealing dark hair underneath instead of Nayla's braided style. Everything had exploded into chaos. Gunfire. Shouting. Seo-hoon's team pouring in from 3 sides. The surveillance feeds showing impossible violence and split-second decisions. Nayla couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Just watched as Seo-hoon barked orders into his radio. his voice ice cold, and absolutely in control, even as his hand shook in hers. Then she'd seen him. Seo-hoon himself, striding into the factory despite every plant saying he should stay back. Moving through the chaos like death itself, heading straight for Ji-woo. "What is he doing?" she'd gasped. Sang-min, monitoring everything, had cursed. Being himself. Stupid. Self-sacrificing. Idiotic. But it had worked. Seo-hoon had reached Ji-woo, cut him free, covered him as they fought their way back out. She'd watched him take a bullet to the shoulder without even flinching. Watched him keep moving, keep protecting, keep fighting until his cousin was safe. By the time the dust settled, Ji-woo was in a medical van being checked over. Half of the enemy force was dead or arrested, and Seo-hoon was bleeding but standing, his eyes searching until they found Nayla through the surveillance van's windshield. She'd burst out of the van despite Sang-min's protests, running toward him with her heart pounding. "You idiot!" she'd shouted, reaching him just as his knees buckled. "You got shot. You promised you'd be careful. You promised." Ji-woo's safe, he'd managed, his weight against her suddenly heavy. That's what matters. You matter too, you self-sacrificing moron. Our baby needs a father. I need you to stop trying to die for everyone. His hand had come up to touch her face, leaving blood on her cheek. "Sorry. Occupational hazard. Not good enough. From now on, your occupation is staying alive for us. Got it?" His smile had been weak but real. "Yes, ma'am." The medical team had taken over then, patching him up efficiently, while Nayla hovered and tried not to cry. The bullet had gone clean through his shoulder. Painful, but not life-threatening. He'd refused anything stronger than local anesthetic because he wanted to stay alert. Ji-woo had approached once he'd been cleared by the medics, looking shell-shocked but grateful. "Hyung, I'm sorry. I didn't know they'd use me to get to you." Seo-hoon had gripped his cousin's hand with his good arm. "Not your fault. Never your fault. But you're moving in with me for a while. No arguments. I can't just leave school. You can, and you will. I'm not losing you because of my enemies." Seo-hoon's voice had been gentle but firm. "Besides, you should get to know Nayla. She's going to be family." Ji-woo had looked at her with wide eyes. Are you two married?" "Not yet," Seo-hoon had said, his eyes finding Nayla's with unmistakable intent. "But soon." Her heart had stuttered. "That's news to me. Consider it a proposal, a terrible, bloody, completely unromantic proposal. You're supposed to ask, not tell." His hand had found hers, squeezing gently. "Nayla Mansour, will you marry me and make me the luckiest man alive, despite the fact that I'm a criminal who just got shot and is probably going to drive you crazy for the next 60 years? She should have said no, should have demanded romance and flowers, and literally anything other than a proposal in the aftermath of a gunfight. But instead, she'd found herself laughing through tears. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. Is that a yes? You're impossible. Is that a yes? She'd leaned down carefully, mindful of his injuries, and kissed his forehead. Yes, you impossible man, yes. Ji-woo had made a face. I'm standing right here. Then look away, Seo-hoon had said, his eyes never leaving Nayla's. Your cousin's getting engaged. The ride back to the estate had been surreal. Seo-hoon had fallen asleep against her shoulder, exhausted from blood loss and adrenaline crash. Ji-woo had sat across from them, still processing everything. Is he always like this? The younger man had asked quietly. Like what? Willing to die for people, throwing himself into danger, being him. Nayla had looked down at Seo-hoon's face, finally peaceful in sleep. Yeah, I think he is. It's terrifying and amazing, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure he survives it. He's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him, even when he's being an idiot." Back at the estate, doctors had checked Seo-hoon over more thoroughly, confirmed the bullet wound was clean, pumped him full of antibiotics, and ordered rest. He'd ignored them long enough to make sure Nayla was settled, to check on Ji-woo one more time, to coordinate cleanup of the night's events with Sang-min. Then he'd finally collapsed into bed beside her, his good arm pulling her close, despite the pain he must have been in. "You should take the pain medication," she'd murmured. "Can't. Need to stay alert in case nothing. There are 50 armed guards outside. Sang-min is handling everything. You need to rest." "Bossy. You're marrying me. Get used to it." His laugh had been soft. "Already am. Have been since Cairo, actually." She'd traced the bandages on his shoulder carefully. "You scared me tonight." "I know. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just don't do it again. Our baby needs you. I need you." Her voice had cracked slightly. "I can't lose you, Seo-hoon. I know your world is dangerous, and I accepted that. But I can't watch you throw your life away. I wasn't throwing it away. I was protecting what matters." "And what about protecting yourself? Don't you matter too?" He'd been quiet for a long moment. Then, "I matter because you love me. Because we're building something together. Before you, I was just going through motions. My life had purpose but not meaning. You gave me meaning." Tears had slipped down her cheeks. "That's a lot of responsibility. You think I don't know that? You think I'm not terrified of failing you?" His hand had moved to her stomach, where their baby grew. "Every day I wake up, wondering how long until you realize you deserve better. How long until my darkness contaminates your light? Seo-hoon, look at me." She'd waited until his eyes met hers. "I'm not going anywhere. Yes, you're dark sometimes. Yes, your world scares me. But you're also the man who spent 3 months watching over me from afar because you wanted me to choose you freely. Who treats our unborn child like something sacred. Who just took a bullet to save your cousin. That's not darkness. That's love in the only way you know how to express it. You make it sound noble. It's not. It's selfish. I saved Ji-woo because I couldn't live with the guilt, not because— Stop. Just stop trying to convince me you're some monster. I see you, Seo-hoon, all of you, the good and the bad, and I choose all of it." He'd pulled her closer, his face in her hair. "You're going to regret this. Probably. But I'll regret it while standing beside you, so at least I'll have company." His shoulders had shaken with silent laughter. "How are you so calm about all this? Because one of us has to be, and because, honestly, tonight proved something to me." "What?" "That you'll do anything to protect the people you love. That you're willing to risk everything, even your own life, for family. Our child is lucky to have that kind of father. Our child is lucky to have you balancing me out. Left to my own devices, I'd probably raise them in a fortress, surrounded by armed guards, and never let them leave." We'll negotiate on the fortress. Maybe just heavy security, instead of total lockdown." "You're mocking me. Little bit. But I also love you. So it's affectionate mocking." He'd gone very still. "Say that again." "Which part?" "The love part." She'd realized with a start that she'd never said it out loud before, had felt it, had shown it, but never actually spoken the words. "I love you, Seo-hoon Kim. I love your intensity and your protection, and even your controlling tendencies when they come from a good place. I love how you look at me like I'm something precious. How you talk to our baby when you think I'm sleeping. How you're trying so hard to be better than you think you are." His kiss had landed on her forehead, lingering and reverent. "I love you too. More than I have words for. More than I should probably tell you because it gives you too much power over me. Good. I like having power over you. Means you'll listen when I tell you to stop getting shot. I'll try, but no promises. Seo-hoon. Kidding. Mostly. He'd yawned despite himself. Stay with me while I sleep. Where else would I go? Smart answer. She'd watched him drift off, his face finally relaxed, his hand still protective on her stomach. Ji-woo had been saved. The immediate threat was handled. They were engaged, building a life together despite the impossibility of it all. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenges were still coming. The next few weeks passed in strange domesticity, despite the armed guards and security protocols. Nayla worked remotely on her research, video calling with colleagues in Cairo. Ji-woo settled into his own room at the estate, studying for his exams, while trying not to look traumatized every time he saw his cousin. Seo-hoon healed quickly, his shoulder recovering with the kind of speed that suggested this wasn't his first gunshot wound. He worked from the estate, running his empire through encrypted calls and video conferences. And slowly, impossibly, they became a family. Nayla would wake to find Seo-hoon already up, bringing her breakfast and prenatal vitamins. He'd work in his office while she worked in the library. They'd have lunch together, sometimes with Ji-woo joining them. Evenings were spent talking, planning, dreaming about their future. What if it's a girl? She'd asked one night, lying in bed with her head on his chest. Then she's never dating. Ever. I'll lock her in a tower. You can't lock our daughter in a tower. Watch me. Seo-hoon. He'd sighed dramatically. Fine, she can date when she's 30. And I'm running background checks on anyone who looks at her. You're impossible. What about if it's a boy? Then I teach him to protect what he loves, to be strong but gentle, to respect women the way his mother deserves to be respected. His hand had moved over her growing bump. To be better than I am. You're pretty great already. I'm a criminal who got shot 3 weeks ago. That's not great. That's concerning. You're a man who saved his cousin, protected his family, and is building a future despite his past. That's heroic. He'd kissed the top of her head. You see me through very rose-colored glasses. I see you through honest glasses. Everyone else just focuses on the scary parts. The scary parts are real, Nayla. Don't forget that. I won't. But the good parts are real, too. Their engagement had been kept quiet. Seo-hoon's world wasn't safe enough for public announcements, but he'd given her a ring anyway. A gorgeous vintage piece with an emerald surrounded by diamonds. It was my grandmother's, he'd explained, slipping it on her finger. She was the only one in my family who believed I could be more than my father's legacy. I think she'd like you. I wish I could have met her. She would have loved you. Probably would have told me I don't deserve you. She'd be right. Probably. But their peaceful bubble couldn't last forever. Reality intruded in the form of a phone call from Cairo. Nayla's boss at the museum, Dr. Hassan, with news that made her heart sink. We need you back, Nayla. The Egyptian government is demanding answers about the missing artifacts from last year's audit. They're threatening to shut us down if we can't provide documentation, and you're the only one who has the complete records. She'd looked at Seo-hoon, who'd been listening to the entire conversation on speakerphone. His face had gone carefully blank. How long do I have? She'd asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3 at most. After that, we'll all lose our jobs, and the museum will be dissolved. After she'd hung up, silence had stretched between them. You have to go, Seo-hoon had finally said. I don't want to leave you. Your career matters. Your work matters. I won't be the reason you lose everything you've built. But the danger? I'll send security with you, half my team if necessary. We'll make it as safe as possible. She'd moved closer to him, her hands on his chest. Come with me. I can't. Not right now. The situation here. If I leave, it could fall apart. But I'll come as soon as I can, I promise. So, we're back to being apart. Just for a little while, and this time, you know I'm coming back. That I'm not leaving you. His hands had framed her face. Besides, you'll have my ring, my child growing inside you, half my security team following you around Cairo. You won't be able to forget me, even if you try. I could never forget you. Good, because I'm going to be calling you every day, multiple times, probably annoying you with how often I check in. I'm counting on it. The goodbye 2 days later had been harder than she'd expected. Seo Hoon had driven her to the airport personally, his hand not leaving hers the entire drive. If anything happens, he'd said at the terminal, anything at all that feels wrong, you call me immediately. I don't care if it's 3 a.m. or if I'm in the middle of a meeting. You call. I will. I promise. And take care of yourself. Of our baby. Don't skip meals or stay up too late working. Yes, Dad. His smile had been slight. I'm serious, Nayla. I know. And I love you for it. But I'm going to be fine. It's just a few weeks. He'd pulled her into his arms then, holding her tight enough that she'd felt his heartbeat against her cheek. I love you. Come back to me. Always. You can't get rid of me that easily. Watching him disappear in the rear view as her security team drove her to the plane had hurt more than she'd expected. But she'd reminded herself. This was temporary. They were building a life together. A few weeks apart wouldn't change that. If only she'd known how wrong she was. Cairo felt like stepping into someone else's life when Nayla returned. The heat was familiar, the noise of the streets unchanged. But she was different. Heavier. Not just from the baby growing inside her, but from the weight of everything she carried now. Love. Fear. Secrets that would change her forever. Her apartment looked abandoned when she unlocked the door. Dust everywhere. Mail piled high. Like she'd been gone years instead of months. The security team Seo Hoon had sent. 3 men named Min, Dae, and Tae moved through the space with quiet efficiency, checking windows, testing locks, setting up surveillance equipment. This is excessive, she'd said, watching them work. Min, the leader, had simply replied, Boss's orders, ma'am. We stay close. She'd stopped arguing. What was the point? Seo Hoon would protect her, whether she wanted it or not. That's who he was. Controlling, yes, but also devoted in ways that still took her breath away. The museum welcomed her back like a lost daughter. Dr. Hassan had hugged her, then stepped back with concern written across his weathered face. Nayla, you're pregnant. Yes. 4 months along. His eyes had widened. And the father? Is in Seoul. It's complicated, Dr. Hassan. Everything with you lately seems complicated. But his voice held only kindness. Are you well? Do you need accommodations? I need to work. This museum needs saving, and I'm the only one with the complete documentation. Time off can wait. So she'd thrown herself into the archives. Long days surrounded by ancient artifacts and modern paperwork, tracking down every piece of documentation the government demanded. The baby kicked occasionally, little reminders that she wasn't alone, even when loneliness threatened to swallow her whole. Seo Hoon called every day, sometimes twice. His voice became her anchor. How are you feeling? He'd ask, his tone always gentle when speaking to her. Tired. The baby's been active today. I think they're practicing martial arts in there. His laugh had been warm, strong, like their mother. I wish I could feel it. Soon. Just finish what you need to do there, and we'll be together again. I'm counting every second, Nayla. Every single one. But the days stretched longer than expected. The audit grew more complex. Egyptian officials, kept requesting additional documentation, more proof, endless verification. What should have taken weeks turned into a month, then 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7. Her stomach grew rounder, impossible to hide now. Strangers would smile at her on the street, offer blessings in Arabic, ask about her due date. She'd smile back and lie about having a husband waiting at home, because the truth, that the father was a Korean crime boss she'd fallen impossibly in love with, seemed too complicated to explain. She felt alone in ways she hadn't since before meeting Seo-hoon. Her security team was present but distant, professional. They weren't friends or family. They were just shadows keeping her safe from threats she couldn't see. "I miss you," she'd whispered into the phone one night, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I can't do this anymore. I need you here." "I know. I'm sorry. I'm booking a flight right now. I should have done this weeks ago instead of trying to handle everything remotely. But your business doesn't matter without you. Nothing matters without you and our baby." His voice had been fierce with determination. "I'm coming, Nayla. I'll be there tomorrow evening. Pack your essentials because we're leaving together, and I'm not letting you out of my sight again." Relief had flooded through her so intensely she'd almost sobbed. "Really? You're really coming?" "I should have been there already. I was trying to give you space to finish your work, but I need to see you, touch you, make sure you and our baby are okay. Tomorrow, Nayla. Just hold on until tomorrow." She'd fallen asleep that night feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Tomorrow. He'd be there tomorrow. They'd be together again. Everything would be okay. But tomorrow brought devastation instead of reunion. Her phone had rung at 4 in the morning, jarring her from dreams of Seo-hoon's arms around her. She'd fumbled for it in the darkness, her heart already racing with undefined dread. Sang-min's voice had been tight, strained in ways she'd never heard before. "Dr. Mansour, there's been an incident. Seo-hoon's plane. It went down over the Mediterranean Sea approximately 2 hours ago. Search and rescue teams are deployed, but..." The phone had slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the floor. The room had tilted sideways. Her lungs had forgotten how to pull in air. No, this wasn't possible. He was supposed to be coming to her. They were supposed to be together. He couldn't be. He couldn't. The scream that tore from her throat had brought her security team running. Min had burst through her bedroom door, weapon drawn, then frozen at the sight of her collapsed on the floor. Phone still connected. Sang-min's voice calling her name from the speaker. "What happened?" Min had demanded, holstering his weapon and dropping to her side. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process the words she'd just heard. Seo-hoon's plane. Down. Mediterranean Sea. Gone. Misum had picked up the phone, spoken rapidly in Korean. His face had gone pale, then hard. When he'd hung up, he'd looked at her with something like pity. "We need to get you to a hospital. You're in shock." "Is he?" She couldn't finish the question, couldn't make the words real. "They're searching. That's all we know right now." The hospital had been a blur of harsh lights and concerned doctors. They'd checked her vitals, monitored the baby, tried to get her to calm down while her world shattered into pieces around her. "Your blood pressure is dangerously high," a doctor had said in accented English. "We need to keep you for observation. The stress, it's not good for the baby." "I don't care about my blood pressure," she'd said, her voice empty. "I need to know if he's alive. That's all that matters." But no one could tell her. The news reports started coming in throughout the day. A private jet registered to a Korean shipping company had gone down over international waters. Debris, field located. No survivors found yet. Search continuing. Yet. That single word became her lifeline, yet meant there was still hope, yet meant he might still be out there, fighting to get back to her. Sang-min called with updates every few hours, his voice growing more strained each time. They'd found wreckage, found luggage, found pieces of the plane scattered across miles of ocean. But no bodies, no survivors, just emptiness. "Keep searching," Nayla had begged, her hand pressed to her stomach where their baby grew. "Please, he's strong. He's a survivor. He could still be out there." "We're using every resource we have, Dr. Mansour. Every boat, every helicopter, every connection. If he's alive, we'll find him." But days passed, then a week, then 2 weeks. The search area expanded, then contracted as hope faded. International rescue teams gave up after 10 days, declaring the search futile. Sang-min kept his teams going for another week before even he had to admit defeat. Seo-hoon Kim was officially declared missing, presumed dead. Nayla had stopped crying after the first week. There were no tears left, just a hollow emptiness that felt like drowning on dry land. She'd returned to her apartment, ignoring the museum's calls, ignoring Dr. Hassan's concerned messages. She just sat in the nursery she'd started preparing, her hand on her growing belly, talking to the baby about their father. "He was brave," she'd whisper, rocking slowly. "So brave and strong. He would have loved you so much. He was coming to us when it happened, coming to make sure we were safe. That's the kind of man your father was. I don't know." She couldn't finish sentences anymore, couldn't decide whether to speak of him in past or present tense. He was gone, but maybe not dead. Missing, but maybe surviving somewhere. Schrodinger's love, simultaneously alive and dead, until someone opened the box and forced reality to choose. Her security team stayed, which surprised her. Min explained quietly that they'd been paid through the end of the year, and even if they hadn't been, they'd stay anyway. Seo-hoon had been their boss, but he'd also been someone they respected. Protecting his woman and his child was the least they could do. "Thank you," she'd managed, the words feeling inadequate. "He'd want us here. So we're here." Ji-woo called from Seoul, his voice shattered by grief. "I can't believe he's gone. He survived so much. How could a plane crash?" "I don't know," Nayla had said numbly. "Nothing makes sense anymore. Do you need anything? Money? Help? I can fly to Cairo." "No, stay there. Finish school." That's what he'd want. "I feel useless." "Me too. But we keep going, because stopping means he's really gone. And I can't accept that yet." The museum work eventually pulled her back. Dr. Hassan had been patient, but the Egyptian government wasn't. They needed the documentation, or the museum would close. Hundreds of people would lose their jobs. Decades of cultural preservation would end. So Nayla had returned to the archives, moving through her days like a ghost. She worked mechanically, organizing records, preparing reports, doing everything that needed doing while feeling absolutely nothing. She was 6 weeks into her grief when Rashid al-Mansouri showed up at the museum. Min had been with her that day, standing discreetly near the archive entrance. When the stranger had approached asking to see Dr. Mansour, her guard had immediately tensed. "Who are you?" Min had demanded. "Rashid al-Mansouri. I was an associate of Mr. Kim's. I have information that Dr. Mansour needs to hear." Nayla had heard the exchange and emerged from the archives, her hand instinctively protective over her stomach. The man before her was Middle Eastern, maybe 40, wearing an expensive suit and an expression that was hard to read. "What information?" she'd asked directly. "Perhaps somewhere more private?" Min had shaken his head, firmly. "Anything you say to her, you say in front of me." Rashid had smiled slightly. "Your loyalty is admirable. But what I have to say concerns Dr. Mansour's safety, and the safety of Mr. Kim's child." Something in his tone had made her agree, despite Min's obvious disapproval. They'd moved to a small office, Min positioning himself by the door, while Rashid took a seat across from her. "I'm very sorry for your loss," Rashid had begun. "Get to the point." What information do you have? Your fiancé made many enemies in his line of work, Dr. Mansour. Some of those enemies wanted him dead badly enough to orchestrate a plane crash. Ice had flooded her veins. You're saying it wasn't an accident? I'm saying there are people who benefited greatly from Mr. Kim's disappearance, people who are now consolidating his territories, taking over his businesses, absorbing his empire piece by piece. People who might see you and your child as either useful leverage or inconvenient complications. Who? The word had come out harsh. That's what I'm still investigating. But I'm telling you this because you're in danger. They know about you. Know about the pregnancy. You need to disappear before they decide what to do with you. Nayla had pressed both hands to her stomach, feeling the baby kick as if sensing her fear. How do I know you're telling the truth? You could be one of these enemies for all I know. You don't know. You have to decide whether to trust me or take your chances that I'm wrong. He'd pulled out a business card, set it on the desk between them. I have contacts who can help you disappear. New identity, new location, a fresh start where Kim's enemies can't find you. Think about it, but don't think too long. These people move fast. After he'd left, Min had immediately made a call to Sang-min, speaking urgently in Korean. When he'd hung up, his expression had been grim. Sang-min says to trust no one. This Rashid character is known to him, but not as an ally. He's advising extreme caution. So, he could be lying, or he could be telling the truth for his own purposes. Either way, you're not safe. That night, Nayla had lain awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling, one hand on her belly. The baby had been active, rolling and kicking, blissfully unaware that their father was gone, and their mother was being hunted by shadows. What do I do? She'd whispered to the empty room. I don't know what to do. Seo-hoon would have known. He'd always known how to protect her, how to handle threats, how to navigate the dangerous waters of his world. But Seo-hoon was gone, and she was alone with decisions that terrified her. She must have finally fallen asleep because she'd woken to the sound of her window sliding open. Her heart had lurched into her throat. Min was supposed to be on watch. How had someone gotten past him? A shadow had moved through her bedroom, and she'd opened her mouth to scream when a hand had clamped gently over it. Don't scream, please. It's me. That voice. She knew that voice better than her own heartbeat. But it couldn't be. It was impossible. He was dead. The search teams had given up. Everyone had declared him gone. The hand had lifted from her mouth. She'd turned slowly, terrified to hope, terrified to believe. Seo-hoon stood beside her bed, soaking wet, covered in cuts and bruises that looked weeks old, his eyes fierce and alive and real. You're dead, she'd whispered, afraid to reach out, afraid he'd disappear if she tried to touch him. I know what they told you. They were wrong. His hand had come up slowly, giving her time to pull away. When his fingers had touched her cheek, solid and warm and impossibly real, something had broken inside her. She'd launched herself at him, sobbing, her hands checking every part of him to make sure he was really there. 6 weeks. They said you were dead. 6 weeks. I thought you were gone. How could you? Why didn't you? I'm sorry. His arms had wrapped around her carefully, mindful of her pregnant belly. I'm so sorry, Nayla. I couldn't contact you. It wasn't safe. I needed everyone to think I was dead, including you, until I figured out who was behind the crash. I don't understand. How did you survive? How are you here? He'd pulled back enough to see her face, his thumb wiping away tears that wouldn't stop falling. The plane started going down, and I realized it was sabotage. I managed to grab an emergency parachute and jump seconds before impact. Spent days in the water, before washing up on a small island. I had to stay hidden, had to let everyone think I was dead while I investigated. I couldn't risk contacting you and leading my enemy straight to you. But Min, your team, Didn't know. Couldn't know. The fewer people who knew I was alive, the safer you were. His hand had moved to her stomach, his eyes filling with wonder and regret as he felt their baby kick. I've missed so much. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for putting you through that grief. You're really here. You're really alive. I'm really here. And I'm not leaving you again. Not for anything. His forehead had lowered to touch hers. But Nayla, we need to leave. Right now. The man who visited you, Rashid al-Mansouri. He's one of the people behind the crash. He's trying to isolate you, make you vulnerable. We don't have much time. Her mind had been spinning, trying to process everything. Min. Is Min safe? I contacted him before coming in. He's outside creating a distraction. But we need to move now. I need to pack. No time? I have everything we need. Just trust me. Trust him. After 6 weeks of thinking he was dead, after the grief that had nearly destroyed her, after everything, she should have been angry, should have demanded explanations, should have made him suffer even a fraction of what she'd suffered. Instead, she'd taken his hand. Okay, let's go. They'd climbed out her window into the Cairo night. The city sprawled below them, full of lights and noise and life. Seo Hoon had moved with practiced efficiency, navigating rooftops and fire escapes like he'd planned this route 100 times. Behind them, she'd heard shouting, gunfire, chaos erupting in her building. Don't look back, Seo Hoon had said, his grip on her hand firm. Just stay with me. They'd run through alleys and side streets, her pregnant body struggling to keep pace. He'd been patient, slowing when she needed to, supporting her when she stumbled. Finally, they'd reached a nondescript building 2 blocks from her apartment. Inside, a safe house had been set up. Medical supplies, food, changes of clothes, everything they'd need to disappear. Song Min had been waiting, his face transforming from concern to joy when he'd seen them. Boss, you made it. Did you doubt me? Every second of every day since the crash. But I'm very glad to be wrong. Nayla had collapsed onto a couch, her breath coming in gasps, her hand pressed to her stomach. The baby had been kicking frantically, probably sensing her stress. Seo Hoon had knelt in front of her immediately, his hands gentle on her belly. Are you okay? Is the baby okay? We're fine, just overwhelmed. Seo Hoon, you need to tell me everything. I need to understand what's happening. So he'd told her about the plane going down, about the days in the water, clinging to debris, thinking of her and their baby, about the island where he'd washed up, barely conscious, about the local fishermen who'd found him and kept him hidden while he healed, about the investigation he'd conducted remotely through Song Min, tracking down who'd sabotaged his plane and why. Rashid al-Mansouri and 3 other high-ranking members of competing organizations orchestrated it together, he'd explained, his voice hard. They wanted my empire split between them. Thought with me dead, it would be easy pickings. They didn't count on my organization's loyalty, or on me surviving. So what now? What happens to us? Now we leave Egypt. Get you somewhere safe while I deal with these people permanently. His jaw had tightened. They made you suffer, made you grieve, threatened our child. There's no forgiveness for that. Seo Hoon, I know what you're going to say. That revenge won't change what happened, that I should let it go. His eyes had met hers, fierce and unyielding. But I can't. Not when they tried to take everything from me. Not when they put you and our baby at risk. She'd understood then. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about protection. About making sure these people could never threaten his family again. About proving that Seo Hoon Kim wasn't someone you tried to eliminate without consequences. Okay, she'd said quietly. But I'm not going into hiding without you. We do this together, or not at all. Nayla, no. I spent 6 weeks thinking you were dead. I'm not spending another 6 weeks, or 6 days, or 6 hours, separated from you. You want to handle this? Fine. But I'm staying by your side. We're a family now. We face things together. He'd looked like he wanted to argue, but then his hand had moved to her stomach again, feeling their baby kick, and something had softened in his expression. Together, he'd agreed. But you follow my lead. You don't take unnecessary risks. And if I tell you to run, you run. Those are my conditions. Deal. They'd sealed it with a kiss on her forehead, gentle and reverent. Then they'd started planning. The next 72 hours had been intense. Sang-min had coordinated everything. Fake documents, new identities, safe travel routes. Meanwhile, evidence against Rashid and his co-conspirators had been compiled. Recordings of their planning sessions, financial transactions showing their coordination. Proof that could destroy them in both legal and criminal circles. We go public with this, Seo-hoon had decided. Let them burn in the spotlight. Their own organizations will turn on them for the liability they've become. And if that's not enough, then I handle it my way. But we try the civilized approach first. The evidence had been released through multiple channels simultaneously. Korean news, international criminal networks, law enforcement in 3 countries. Within hours, Rashid al-Mansouri and his allies had been exposed, hunted by authorities and their own former associates. Nayla had watched it unfold from the safe house, Seo-hoon beside her, his hand never leaving hers. It's working, Sang-min had reported. They're in hiding. Their organizations are collapsing. Within days, they'll be completely neutralized. Good. Seo-hoon's voice had been satisfied, but not triumphant. Now, we can focus on what matters. What mattered was getting Nayla out of Egypt safely. They'd left 3 days later on a private jet, this one thoroughly inspected and guarded. Seo-hoon had held her hand the entire flight, his thumb rubbing circles on her palm, his eyes checking on her constantly. How are you feeling? He'd asked for the 100th time. Tired, scared, happy, confused, angry at you for putting me through that grief, grateful you're alive, all of it at once. You have every right to be angry. I know, but I'm too relieved to be angry right now. Maybe later, when this all feels real. Whenever you're ready, I'll take whatever you need to give me. Anger, punishment, whatever helps. She'd looked at him then, really looked. He'd lost weight, had new scars on his face and hands, looked exhausted in ways that went deeper than physical tiredness. He'd survived a plane crash and 6 weeks of hiding and constant danger, all while knowing she thought he was dead and being unable to contact her. You're not the only one who suffered, she'd said quietly. You must have been terrified too. Every second, wondering if you were safe, if the baby was okay, if you'd forgive me for making you go through that. His voice had cracked slightly. I heard you cried so hard you had to be hospitalized. That almost broke me, Nayla, knowing I caused you that much pain. How did you? I had people watching you, making sure you were safe even if I couldn't be there. They reported back, told me you'd stopped eating properly, stopped sleeping. I wanted to reveal myself 100 times, but I couldn't. Not until I knew who was behind the crash and had neutralized the threat. She'd leaned her head on his shoulder. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll never fake your death again, even if you think it's to protect me. I'd rather face danger with you than safety without you. I promise. I swear on our child's life, I'll never put you through that again. They'd landed in Seoul at dawn. Ji-woo had been waiting at the airport, and when he'd seen his cousin alive, he'd actually broken down, crying. You're supposed to be dead, Jiwoo had sobbed, hugging Seo-hoon tightly. I went to your memorial service. I cried in front of like 200 people. Sorry about that. But I'm back now, and I'm never leaving again. From the airport, they'd gone straight to a courthouse. Sang-min had somehow arranged everything in advance. Marriage license, official, witnesses, all of it waiting for them. What are we doing? Nayla had asked, confused. Getting married. Right now. Today. Seo-hoon's eyes had been intense. I'm not waiting anymore. I've been separated from you twice, and both times nearly destroyed me. You're becoming my wife right now, officially and legally, so nothing can ever question your place in my life. That's insane? Controlling? Too fast? Perfect. That's perfect. The ceremony had taken less than an hour. No fancy dress, no decorations, no reception. Just Nayla in the clothes she'd traveled in, and Seo-hoon in a fresh suit, standing before an official and promising to love each other forever. When they'd been pronounced married, Seo-hoon had kissed her forehead with such tenderness she'd cried. I wish we could have done this properly, he'd said, his thumb wiping away her tears. Given you the big wedding you deserved, flowers and music and all of it. This is what I need. You, officially, undeniably mine. I've been yours since Cairo. This just makes it legal. They'd gone to the estate afterward, and Nayla had gasped when she'd seen what Seo-hoon had prepared. A nursery, fully furnished. Crib, changing table, rocking chair, everything a baby could need. All of it in soft yellows and greens, gender neutral and beautiful. When did you? Ordered it all before I got on that plane. Had it delivered and assembled while I was missing. I wanted it ready for when you came home. His hand had found hers. This is home now, Nayla. Ours, for our family. She'd turned to him, emotions overwhelming her. I love you. I know I've said it before, but I need you to really hear it. I love you, Seo-hoon Kim, even when you're controlling and overprotective and make decisions without me. Even when you terrify me with how much danger you put yourself in. Even when you fake your death and make me think I lost you forever. I love all of you. His kiss had landed on her forehead, then her cheeks, then the tip of her nose. I love you too, more than I have words for, and I'm going to spend the rest of our lives proving it every single day. They'd climbed into bed together that afternoon, exhausted from travel and emotion and everything they'd been through. His arm had come around her, his hand splaying protectively over her pregnant stomach. Sleep, he'd murmured. You're safe now. We both are. And for the first time in 6 weeks, Nayla had actually believed it. Cairo fell middle of the night to find Seo-hoon gone. She'd found him in the nursery, sitting in the rocking chair, staring at nothing. Can't sleep? She'd asked from the doorway. Thinking about everything that could have gone wrong, how close I came to never meeting our child, how you suffered because of me. She'd walk to him, settling herself carefully in his lap despite her pregnant belly. Hey, stop that. You survived. We're here. That's what matters. Is it? What about next time? What about the next person who wants to hurt me by targeting you? Then we deal with it together. But you can't live your life waiting for the next disaster. I don't know how to do anything else. His voice had been raw. My whole life has been about anticipating threats, eliminating enemies, staying 3 steps ahead. How do I just stop? You don't have to stop being careful, but you do have to start believing that good things can last. She'd taken his face in her hands, making him look at her. We're married. We're having a baby. You're alive despite impossible odds. Let yourself be happy about that. I am happy. That's what terrifies me. I have so much to lose now. So protect it. But also enjoy it. Our baby is going to be here in 3 months. Do you really want to spend that time worrying about what-ifs? He'd pulled her closer, his face in her neck. No, I want to spend it with you, preparing, building, being. Normal? I was going to say present, but normal works too. And he had been. For the next few weeks, Seo-hoon had stepped back from his business as much as possible, focusing on Nayla and preparing for their child. They'd painted the nursery together, assembled furniture, argued about names. I like Ari, she'd suggested one afternoon. Too cute, needs to be stronger. It means lion, that's strong. He'd considered this. Ari Kim, I don't hate it. High praise from you. I'm very selective. Our child deserves a perfect name. No pressure or anything. They'd laughed about it, shelving the discussion for later. There was time. Everything felt stable, safe, like maybe they'd finally found their peace, until Nayla had woken up one morning with severe cramping. She was only 7 months along, too early for labor. Way too early. Seo-hoon, she'd gasped, doubling over in pain. Something's wrong. The hospital was a blur of white walls and urgent voices. Doctors speaking rapid Korean, while Seo-hoon translated with barely controlled panic. Monitors beeping. Nayla's hand crushing his as another contraction hit. It's preterm labor, the doctor had finally explained in English. We're going to try to stop it, but if we can't, the baby is viable at 7 months. Small, but viable. Do whatever it takes, Seo-hoon had said, his voice steel and desperation. Save them both. They'd pumped Nayla full of medications to stop the contractions. Steroids for the baby's lungs just in case. Bed rest orders. No stress. Complete monitoring. You're going to be okay, Seo-hoon had kept saying, sitting beside her hospital bed, his hand holding hers like a lifeline. Both of you are going to be okay. You can't promise that. Watch me. But his eyes had been terrified. She'd seen it. That fear that all his power and resources and control couldn't protect her from her own body betraying them. The contractions had finally stopped after 18 hours. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic. Bed rest for the remaining 2 months, close monitoring, any sign of labor, and she'd need to come straight back. Going home had felt like defeat somehow. Nayla found herself confined to bed, unable to work, unable to do anything except wait and worry and feel useless. I hate this, she'd said one afternoon, staring at the ceiling. Seo-hoon had been working from a laptop beside her bed, barely leaving her side. I know, but it's temporary. 2 months isn't temporary. It's forever. It's necessary. For our baby. She'd known he was right, had known she needed to rest. But the boredom was crushing. The fear that something else might go wrong kept her awake at night. Ji-woo had visited often, bringing books and gossip from his university. My friends think I'm making up having a cousin who's a crime boss. Ex-crime boss, Seo-hoon had corrected. I'm transitioning to legitimate business. Since when? Since I realized I'm going to be a father, and maybe I should set a better example. Nayla had looked at him in shock. You're serious? Completely. I've been working with Sang-min to move our operations toward legal enterprises, shutting down the dangerous stuff. It'll take time, but our child deserves a father who won't end up dead or in prison. That's huge. You're worth changing for. Both of you are. She'd cried then, hormones and love and relief all mixing together. He'd held her through it, patient and steady, the way he always was with her. I love you, she'd whispered against his chest. I love you more than I have words for. Which is why I'm doing everything possible to make sure we get boring and normal and safe. Boring and normal sounds amazing right now. Right? I'm kind of looking forward to it. But boring and normal proved elusive. A week later, Sang-min had arrived with news that made Seo-hoon's jaw tighten. They found Rashid. He's in hiding in Morocco. But the other 3 conspirators, they're making moves, trying to destabilize what's left of your organization, force you out completely. Seo-hoon had been quiet for a long moment. Then, handle it. Boss. I said, handle it. You have my full authority. Do whatever's necessary. I'm staying with my wife. After Sang-min had left, Nayla had reached for Seo-hoon's hand. You trust him to handle it? I trust him more than anyone except you. And I meant what I said. I'm not leaving you. Not for business. Not for revenge. Not for anything. They tried to kill you. And they failed. Now they'll pay for it. But I don't have to be the one collecting payment. I have people for that. My job now is being here. Being your husband. Being ready to be a father. She'd pulled him down for a kiss on the cheek, emotional and grateful. You're really changing, aren't you? You changed me. From the moment I saw you in Cairo, nothing else mattered the same way. Took me a while to accept it, but you're my priority now. You and our baby. Everything else is just noise. The next 6 weeks passed slowly. Nayla grew bigger, more uncomfortable. The baby kicked constantly, active and strong. Seo-hoon talked to her stomach every night, reading stories in Korean and English, playing music, telling their child about all the things they'd do together. We'll travel, he'd say, his hand on her belly. Show you Egypt, where your mother's from. Korea, where I was born. Anywhere you want to go. And I'll teach you to be strong but gentle. Brave but careful. To protect the people you love without losing yourself in the process. You're going to be such a good father, Nayla would murmur, half asleep. I'm going to try. That's all I can promise. At 36 weeks, Nayla had woken up to dampness between her legs and the unmistakable feeling that things were happening. Seo-hoon, I think my water broke. He'd been dressed and had her in the car within 5 minutes, calling ahead to the hospital, his voice calm even though his hands shook on the steering wheel. It's going to be okay, he'd kept saying. You're going to be amazing. Our baby is going to be perfect. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because they're half you. That automatically makes them incredible. Labor had been long, painful, exhausting in ways nothing else had ever been. Seo-hoon had stayed beside her the entire time, letting her crush his hand, wiping her forehead, counting contractions, breathing with her. I can't do this, she'd gasped at one point, 12 hours in. Yes, you can. You're the strongest person I know. I'm not. I can't. Nayla. His voice had been firm, grounding. Look at me. You walked into a room full of criminals to save a piece of history. You survived being hunted by my enemies. You thought I was dead, and you kept going for our child. You're a warrior. This is just one more battle, and you're going to win. Something in his words had steadied her, had reminded her who she was beneath the pain and fear. She'd nodded, gathered her strength, and pushed. Their daughter had been born at 3 in the morning, small but healthy, screaming her fury at the world with impressive volume. The nurse had placed her on Nayla's chest, and time had stopped. Perfect. She was absolutely perfect. Dark hair, golden brown skin that was the perfect blend of both parents, tiny fists waving angrily. Nayla couldn't find words. Seo-hoon had been crying silently, his hand touching their daughter's head with devastating gentleness. She's everything. She's ours. What should we name her? He'd thought for a moment, his eyes never leaving his daughter. Ari, like you wanted. Ari Mansoor Kim. Lion. Brave. Like her mother. Ari, Nayla had whispered, testing the name. Their daughter had stopped crying at the sound, her tiny eyes trying to focus. Welcome to the world, baby girl. We've been waiting for you. The first few weeks with Ari had been chaos. Sleepless nights, constant feeding, learning how to be parents while exhausted and overwhelmed, but also joy unlike anything either of them had experienced. Every small sound Ari made, every expression, every milestone was miraculous. Seo Hoon had been surprisingly natural with her. He'd change diapers without complaint, walk her around at 2 a.m. when she couldn't sleep, stare at her for hours, like she was the most fascinating thing in the universe. "You're going to spoil her," Nayla had said one afternoon, watching him rock their daughter. "Absolutely. That's my job as a father." "What about discipline? Structure? All those things you said you'd teach her?" "She's 6 weeks old. Discipline can wait. Right now, she just needs to know she's loved, that she's safe, that her parents would burn the world down to protect her. You're terrifying and adorable at the same time. I contain multitudes." Ji-woo had been an attentive uncle, visiting often, bringing gifts, offering to babysit so they could sleep. "She's so tiny. How are humans this small?" "You were this small once," Seo Hoon had pointed out. "That's terrifying. I could have been dropped so easily." "You were dropped, multiple times. Explains a lot, actually." They'd laughed, easy and comfortable, like a real family, which they were now. Legally, emotionally, in every way that mattered. 3 months after Ari's birth, Sang-min had requested a meeting. Seo Hoon had been reluctant to leave Nayla and the baby, but his second-in-command had insisted it was important. "The transition is complete," Sang-min had reported in Seo Hoon's office. "We've moved entirely into legitimate business, shipping, real estate, technology investments. All the illegal operations have been shut down or sold off to people we trust, not to cause problems. And the conspirators? Rashid and his allies are no longer threats. They've been neutralized, quietly. No blowback on you or your family." Seo Hoon had nodded slowly. "Good. And my reputation?" "Changed. You're seen as a businessman now, not a crime boss. Some people miss the old you, but most respect what you're building. It's solid, boss. Clean. Thank you. For everything. I couldn't have done this without you." Sang-min had smiled slightly. "You went soft on us, but it looks good on you. Fatherhood suits you." "It terrifies me. But yeah, it does." Returning to Nayla and Ari, Seo Hoon had found his wife feeding their daughter, humming softly. She'd looked up when he entered, questions in her eyes. "It's done," he'd said quietly. "We're out, completely legitimate. No more danger. No more looking over our shoulders. Just us. A family." She'd started crying, relief and joy and exhaustion all mixing together. "Really? It's really over? It's really over. Well, the dangerous part is over. The hard part of raising a tiny human is just beginning." He'd sat beside them, his arm around Nayla, his hand on Ari's back. Their daughter had finished eating and promptly fallen asleep, milk-drunk and content. They'd sat like that for a long time, just being together, being safe, being a family. "I never thought I'd have this," Seo Hoon had finally said. "Never thought I deserved it." "You deserve everything good, Seo Hoon. You fought for it, changed for it, built a whole new life for us. You made it worth fighting for, both of you." He'd kissed Nayla's temple, then Ari's head. "I love you. Both of you. More than anything in this world. We love you too, even when you're being overprotective and impossible. Especially then. Especially then." 6 months later, they'd had the wedding they'd always wanted. Not the rushed courthouse ceremony, but a real celebration. Small, intimate. Just close friends and family. Held at the estate, overlooking Seoul, with Ari in a tiny dress as the world's youngest attendant. Nayla had worn white, her body still recovering from pregnancy but strong. Seo-hoon had worn a traditional Korean suit, looking devastating and happy in equal measure. When they'd exchanged vows, real vows this time, not just legal formalities, there hadn't been a dry eye in the crowd. "I promise to love you even when you steal the covers," Nayla had said, smiling through tears. "To support your dreams even when they terrify me. To remind you that you're good even when you doubt it. To build this life with you, day by day, year by year, until we're too old to remember why we were ever afraid." Seo-hoon's vows had been simpler, but no less powerful. "I promise to protect you without controlling you. To trust you even when I'm scared. To be the man you see when you look at me, not the man I was before you. To love you and our daughter, and whatever future children we're blessed with everything I am, for as long as I breathe." Their kiss had been tender, witnessed by everyone who mattered. And for the first time in either of their lives, the future looked bright instead of dangerous. Ari had started crying during the ceremony, her baby voice loud in the quiet moment. Everyone had laughed. Seo-hoon had picked her up, holding her against his shoulder, while still holding Nayla's hand. "See," he'd murmured to their daughter. "This is what love looks like. Messy and imperfect, and absolutely perfect at the same time." The reception had been joyful, dancing, food, speeches from Ji-woo and Sang-min that had made everyone laugh and cry. Nayla's friend Zara had flown in from Cairo, squealing about how much had changed since that terrifying afternoon at the cafe. "You're married to him, married, and you have a baby. This is insane." "I know, but good insane. The best kind." Zara had hugged her tight. "I'm happy for you, terrified for you, but happy." That's pretty much my life now. Terror and happiness in equal measure. As the night wound down and guests started leaving, Seo-hoon had found Nayla on the balcony, Ari asleep in her arms. He'd wrapped his arms around both of them, chin resting on Nayla's shoulder. "Happy?" he'd asked, deliriously. "You? More than I have words for. This is everything I never knew I needed. Good, because you're stuck with us now. No takebacks. Wouldn't dream of it." They'd stood there watching the sun set over Seoul, their daughter between them, their future stretching out like a promise. It wasn't the life either of them had planned. It was better, messier, more complicated, but absolutely, perfectly theirs. Ari had stirred in Nayla's arms, making small baby noises. Seo-hoon had reached down to stroke her cheek, his expression soft with wonder. "Thank you," he'd said quietly to Nayla. "For what?" "For seeing past what I was, for believing I could be better, for giving me a family I don't deserve but will spend every day trying to earn. You already earned it. Every single day you show up, protect us, love us. That's earning it. I'm going to keep showing up for the rest of my life, through good and bad, through easy and hard. I'm here, Nayla. Always. I know. That's why I married you. Well, that and you're pretty good looking when you're not scowling." His laugh had been quiet so as not to wake Ari. "I'll try to scowl less." "Don't. I kind of like your scowl. It's grown on me. You're ridiculous. And you love me anyway. More than anything. More than everything." Inside, the last guests were leaving. The staff was cleaning up. Their life was waiting to continue. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Parenthood, business, the constant work of building a life together. But tonight, they had this perfect moment. This family they'd fought so hard to create. "Ready to go inside?" Seo-hoon had asked. "In a minute. I just want to remember this. All of it. How it feels right now." So they'd stayed, the three of them, watching night fall over the city. And for the first time in either of their lives, the darkness didn't feel threatening. It felt like possibility, like promise, like the beginning of something beautiful that would last forever. Because they'd learned something important through all the danger and separation and fear. Love wasn't about perfect circumstances or easy choices. It was about showing up even when things were hard, about choosing each other over and over again, about building something worth fighting for, then fighting for it with everything you had. Seo-hoon had started this journey as a crime boss, willing to destroy anything in his path. Nayla had started as an archaeologist, trying to save artifacts, but they'd both been searching for the same thing without knowing it. Someone to see them, accept them, love them despite their flaws. And they'd found it. Found each other. Found a love that conquered fear and power and danger. Found a family that was messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. Ari would grow up knowing her parents' story, would understand that love was worth fighting for, that change was possible, that the past didn't define the future unless you let it. And someday, when she was older, they'd tell her about the beginning, about an auction house in Cairo, about a woman brave enough to walk into danger and a man brave enough to change for her, about obstacles that seemed impossible until they weren't, about choosing love even when it was terrifying, because that was the real story. Not the danger or the drama or the complications, but the choice, the daily decision to love someone, to build with them, to create something beautiful out of broken pieces. Years later, Seo-hoon would look back on this moment and realize it was the first time he'd truly felt at peace. Not because the danger was gone. There would always be challenges, always be threats, in some form. But because he'd finally learned what mattered, who mattered, and he'd built his entire life around protecting and cherishing them. Nayla would remember this night as the moment she stopped being afraid, stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, stopped expecting Seo-hoon to disappear or change his mind, because his actions had proven over and over that he was in this forever, that she and Ari were his world, that nothing would ever change that. And Ari, though she wouldn't remember this specific night, would grow up surrounded by that love, would see her parents choose each other every day, would learn from their example that real love wasn't perfect. It was persistent, patient, willing to fight for what mattered. The balcony door had opened behind them. Ji-woo had poked his head out. "Hey, the photographer wants one more family photo before they leave." Seo-hoon and Nayla had exchanged a look. Then they'd nodded. "Coming," Nayla had said. They'd walked back, inside together, Ari still sleeping peacefully, ready to capture this moment forever. Ready to continue building their impossible, beautiful, perfectly imperfect life. Because this was their happily ever after. Not easy, not perfect, but earned through blood and tears and unwavering devotion. And that made it more valuable than any fairy tale ending could ever be. The photographer had positioned them by the window, the Seoul skyline glittering behind them. Seo-hoon had wrapped his arm around Nayla, both of them gazing down at their daughter. The flash had gone off, capturing a moment of pure joy. "Perfect," the photographer had said. "That's the one." And it was. Perfect. Imperfect. Real. Everything they'd fought for distilled into a single image of family, love, and hope for the future. As the photographer packed up and left, as the staff finished cleaning, as the estate settled into quiet, Seo-hoon and Nayla had taken Ari upstairs to her nursery. They'd put her in her crib, watched her sleep for a few moments, then retreated to their own room. "Long day," Nayla had said, collapsing onto the bed. "Best day of my life. Second best was when we met. Third was when Ari was born. You have a ranking system? For important moments? Absolutely. I'm very organized. She'd laughed, pulling him down beside her. I love you, Seo-hoon Kim, my impossible, organized, overprotective husband. I love you too, Naila Mansour Kim, my brave, stubborn, absolutely perfect wife. They'd fallen asleep tangled together, the way they always did. Safe, loved, home. And outside their window, Seoul sparkled with possibility. Their future stretched out before them, uncertain but bright. They'd face it together, handle whatever came, build their family day by day, year by year, with love as their foundation. Because they'd learned the most important lesson of all. Love wasn't about never facing obstacles. It was about facing them together. And as long as they had each other, they could survive anything. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that everyone deserves a second chance at love, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't defined by their past or what others say about them.